Let's take a look at some of the worst predators in history who tried to deny, justify, or escape their crimes, only to face the wrath of the judges and the victims. Are you ready to see some justice served? Let's get started. Larry Nassar. Our first story is about Larry Nassar, the former USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University doctor who was sentenced for repeatedly sexually assaulting at least 265 young women and girls over 2 decades. Nassar used his position of trust and authority to abuse his patients under the guise of medical treatment. He was exposed by several brave survivors who came forward to share their stories and demand justice. During the sentencing hearing, Nassar had to face the impact statements of more than 150 of his victims, who confronted him with their pain and anger. Nassar had to listen to their testimonies, which revealed the extent of his crimes and the damage he had caused. He also had to face the wrath of Randall Margraves, the father of 3 of his victims, who attempted to attack him during the hearing. Margraves asked the judge for 5 minutes alone with Nassar, but was denied. He then lunged at Nassar but was restrained by the officers. He was later released without charges, after apologizing to the court. The judge then sentenced Nassar to 40 to 175 years in prison, to be served after a separate 60-year sentence for child pornography, totaling at least 100 years. She said that Nassar would never see the light of day again, and that she had just signed his death warrant. Christopher Branham. Our next story is about Christopher Branham, a 35-year-old man who was arraigned for exposing himself and assaulting a young boy in a movie theater restroom. Branham had followed the boy into the restroom, where he grabbed him and forced him to perform oral sex on him. He then fled the scene but was identified by the boy and the surveillance video. He was arrested and charged with sexual assault of a child, indecency with a child, and evading arrest. During the arraignment, the prosecutor described Branham as a sexual predator with poor impulse control and drug-alcohol use. He said that Branham had a history of similar offenses and that he posed a danger to the public. He also said that Branham had confessed to the crime and that he had expressed no remorse or empathy for his victim. Branham decided to plead no contest to the sexual assault charges, which meant that he accepted the conviction without admitting guilt. He hoped that this would result in a lenient sentence, but he was wrong. The judge sentenced him to a maximum of 35 years in prison, which was the highest possible penalty for his charges. He said that Branham would have to serve at least half of his sentence before being eligible for parole, and that he would have to register as a sex offender for life. Francisco de Aragon. Our third story is about Francisco de Aragon, a 34-year-old man who was found guilty of molesting 3 6-year-old girls. De Aragon was a swim instructor at a local pool, where he used his position to abuse his students. He touched the girls inappropriately and made them touch him as well. He also threatened them to keep quiet and told them that it was a game. During the trial, the girls testified about the abuse and how it affected them. De Aragon denied the charges and claimed that he was innocent. The jury didn't buy his defense and found him guilty of 4 counts of lewd and lascivious molestation. De Aragon had rejected a 25-year plea deal, hoping that he would be acquitted or get a lighter sentence. But he was wrong. The judge sentenced him to 4 life sentences, 1 for each count. Christopher Elwell. Our fourth story is about Christopher Elwell, a 29-year-old man who was sentenced for aggravated, felonious sexual assault of a 4-year-old girl. Elwell had befriended the girl's mother and had gained access to her home. He then sexually abused the girl while she was sleeping and recorded the act on his phone. He was caught by the girl's father, who found the video on Elwell's phone. He was arrested and charged with sexual assault, child pornography, and failure to register as a sex offender. During the sentencing hearing, Elwell had to face the impact statement of the girl's mother, who confronted him with her pain and anger. The judge then sentenced Elwell to 7 to 15 years in prison, which was the maximum penalty for his charges. She said that Elwell would have to serve at least 85% of his sentence before being eligible for parole, and that he would have to register as a sex offender for life. Elwell's troubles didn't end there. After the sentencing, he was assaulted by another inmate, who punched him in the face and knocked him to the ground. The inmate was later identified as Josiah Davies, who was serving time for robbery and assault. Davies said that he attacked Elwell because he hated child molesters, and that he wanted to teach him a lesson. He said that he was not afraid of the consequences and that he would do it again if he had the chance. Lewis Matthews. Our fifth story is about Lewis Matthews, a 44-year-old man who was charged with sexual battery on a victim under 12. Matthews had assaulted a sleeping 10-year-old girl, who was the daughter of his girlfriend. He had sneaked into her bedroom and raped her while she was unconscious. He then tried to cover up his crime by using bleach to destroy the DNA evidence. He was interrupted by the girl's mother, who heard her daughter's screams. He was arrested and identified by the girl and the forensic evidence. During the trial, Matthews denied the charges and claimed that he was a victim of a conspiracy and that he was being framed by the girl's mother or the police. The jury didn't buy his defense and found him guilty of sexual battery. The judge then sentenced him to life imprisonment plus 55 years, which was the highest possible penalty for his charge. John Acklin. Our sixth story is about John Acklin, a 40-year-old man who was charged with 16 counts of sexually assaulting 2 children. Acklin had abused the children, who were the daughters of his girlfriend, over a period of 4 years. He had threatened them to keep quiet and told them that it was a secret. He was exposed by the children, who came forward to share their stories and demand justice. During the trial, the jury found him guilty of all 16 counts of sexual assault. He was sentenced to 335 years in state prison. Michael Peach. Our seventh story is about Michael Peach, a 46-year-old man who was convicted of gross sexual imposition, kidnapping, and felonious assault. Peach had kidnapped a 12-year-old girl who was walking home from school and took her to his apartment. He then sexually abused her and beat her with a hammer. He also tried to strangle her, but she managed to escape and call for help. He was arrested and identified by the girl and the DNA evidence. During the trial, Peach denied the charges and claimed that he had a mental illness and that he was not responsible for his actions. But the jury found him guilty of all charges. The judge sentenced him to 48 years in prison. Edwin Rim. Our eighth story is about Edwin Rim, a 27-year-old man who was charged with raping a 9-month-old baby. Rim had babysat the baby, who was the son of his girlfriend's friend, while the mother was at work. He then sexually assaulted the baby and caused serious internal injuries. He was caught by the mother, who noticed the blood and the bruises on the baby. He was arrested and identified by the DNA evidence. During the trial, Rim claimed that he was insane and that he heard voices telling him to hurt the baby. He said that he was not in control of his actions, but he was eventually found guilty of sexual battery. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Ronnie Salazar. Our ninth story is about Ronnie Salazar, a 21-year-old man who was charged with sexual assault and first-degree murder of his 11-year-old sister. Salazar had raped and stabbed his sister, who was sleeping in her bedroom, more than 100 times. He then tried to cover up his crime by setting the house on fire. He was caught by the police, who found him hiding in a nearby dumpster. He was arrested and identified by the DNA evidence. During the trial, Salazar admitted to the crime and said that he was angry and jealous of his sister. He said that he hated her and that he wanted to make her suffer. Salazar was originally sentenced to life in prison without parole, which was the mandatory penalty for his charge. However, due to a change in the law, he became eligible for a review after 25 years. He was then resentenced to 40 years in prison. Terry McFadden. Our 10th and final story is about Terry McFadden, a 52-year-old man who was accused of sexually abusing 2 children at his wife's daycare. McFadden had molested the children, who were 4 and 5 years old, over a period of 2 years. He had threatened them to keep quiet and told them that it was a secret. He was exposed by the children, who came forward to share their stories and demand justice. During the trial, McFadden denied the charges and claimed that he loved the children and that he would never hurt them. He also said that he had a good reputation and that he was a respected member of the community. But he was found guilty of 2 counts of child molestation. He was then sentenced to 22 years in prison, which was the maximum penalty for his charges. The judge said that McFadden would have to serve at least 85% of his sentence before being eligible for parole, and that he would have to register as a sex offender for life. Well, that's it for this video. What do you think of these cases? Do you think the judges were fair or harsh? Do you have any other stories of justice served that you want to share? Don't hesitate to do so.